Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, this is Oxhorn, and I have a question for you. Is the sole survivor a synth? I ask because it's one of the questions Dima asks you when you get to Far Harbor.
Tell me, are you a synth?
No, but if I squint real hard in the mirror, sometimes I look like someone else.
We so easily accept what's presented to us as the truth, don't we?
That's preposterous! Of course the sole survivor isn't a synth. We start the game 200 years before the Institute even exists. What a ridiculous proposition. But then I started to think about it, and started to realize that there were a few things that kinda made sense. But only if the sole survivor was a synth. Due to the nature of this video does contain major plot spoilers. So if you haven't finished the plot to Fallout 4, turn back now. Now, I'll say right now that I found no hard evidence that the sole survivor is a synth or not. Consider this a fan conspiracy theory. In what scenario could the sole survivor be a synth? There's really only one opportunity for the sole survivor to become a synth. He couldn't have been a synth at the very beginning of the game because the Institute didn't even exist. And it's unlikely that the sole survivor could have become a synth after waking up from Vault 111, simply because all of those memories are so recent and fresh in his or her mind. Really, the best opportunity for the sole survivor to have become a synth is during his or her 200-year sleep in the cryogenic pod in Vault 111. Vault Tech was gone, no one was there watching them, anything could have happened. When the sole survivor wakes up in Vault 111, he or she is surrounded by all of his dead neighbors from Sanctuary, which itself is very strange. Why is everyone else dead, but the sole survivor is the only one left alive? Well, we find the answer to this in Kellogg's memories. When you explore Kellogg's mind in the memory den, you can relive the scene where he takes baby Sean. But what's interesting is if you examine the cryopod, you get a little bit more information from Kellogg about what was going on here.
I never knew why we didn't just refreeze the rest of them. But we had our orders. I guess the old man didn't want so many loose ends. Too bad he left alive the one person he shouldn't have.
Now, Kellogg says old man. He couldn't have been referring to Father. As we know, Father is the little baby that he just kidnapped from the cryopod. So the previous director of the Institute must have been a man and must have been an old man. That's all we can assume here, unless it was a lore-breaking mistake on Bethesda's part. Either way, it was at this moment that the Institute allowed every other human being in the cryopods to die by turning off life support except for you, the sole survivor. If you check out the terminals in Vault 111, you see that life support and the cryogenic freezing were both turned off remotely by the Institute. So to echo Kellogg's question, why didn't the Institute just refreeze the rest of them? It seems like an odd thing to do, to wake up a group of people who've been frozen for about 150 years, only to just kill them all instead of putting them back to sleep. Well, I think the answer can be found in the way that the Institute approaches the outside world. After Bunker Hill, when you talk to Father, you learn a little bit more about how his mind operates. During this conversation, we learn that Father was the one who decided to finally release the sole survivor from Vault 111.
When I had you released from Vault 111, I had no expectations that you'd survive out here.
Why let me out now? After all this time.
That's hard to explain. Certainly, it was no longer necessary to keep you suspended.
Now, what I gather from this is that when the Institute thinks that something is unnecessary, they tend to destroy it. This is what Kellogg alluded to when he mentioned that the Institute was tying up loose ends.
I guess the old man didn't want so many loose ends.
And then here a Father says that certainly it was unnecessary to keep the sole survivor in suspended animation.
Certainly, it was no longer necessary to keep you suspended.
The sole survivor was originally kept in suspended animation as a backup in case Sean's DNA didn't work out.
At least we still have the backup.
Kellogg called me the backup.
Did he? Well, he was correct. I was the perfect candidate. An infant with uncorrupted DNA. But if something were to go wrong, if I died, well, the Institute realized a contingency plan was prudent. Another source of pre-war DNA, preferably related to their primary subject. It only made sense that my parents should fill that role. So you were kept alive and safe within the vault.
But Sean's DNA did work out. The Synth program was well underway, and little Sean himself was growing up within the walls of the Institute. Here's where the fan theory comes in. What if the director of the Institute at that time turns off the life support for the sole survivor remotely once the Synth program is successfully underway to, quote, tie up loose ends? That goes along with the character of the Institute. It certainly goes along with how the Institute tends to operate. Not only do they kill all of the other people cryogenically frozen in Vault 111, but they tend to do this whenever they come across anyone who could potentially be a threat to them. It was the Institute that murdered absolutely everyone during the meeting of the Commonwealth Provisional Government.
Massacre of the CPG? What's that?
The Commonwealth Provisional Government. Years back, a group of settlements tried to get together and form a coalition. Every settlement with even a hint of clout sent representatives to try and hash out an agreement. Only the Institute sent a representative of their own, a Synth. The man killed every rep at the talks. The Commonwealth Provisional Government was over before it even got off the ground.
Those were just more loose ends to tie up. So this theory, that the previous director of the Institute killed the sole survivor, avoids the really big question, which is, why would Father kill his last remaining parent? Well, I don't think he would have. After all, we all know that he harbors a little bit of resentment towards Kellogg for killing his first parent, but he didn't even know that his second parent was cryogenically frozen until he became director of the Institute himself.
You could have let me out decades ago.
Until I became director, I had no idea you were there. And after, there was initially no logical reason to do so.
Now, according to Father, he released the sole survivor, his last remaining parent, almost on a whim.
Well, I suppose I wanted to see what would happen. An experiment of sorts.
It's kind of a callous thing to do. An experiment? He even admits that he had no expectation that his parent would survive.
Would you even survive? I had no expectations that you'd survive out here.
In effect, by releasing his parent, he was very likely killing the sole survivor at that moment. At least in his mind, because he didn't expect the sole survivor would live. Which is weird. Would a man who resented Kellogg for killing his first parent be so callous as to haphazardly potentially kill his second parent? He says he did so as an experiment. Well, what kind of experiment? He just wanted to see what would happen? But what would he learn from that? What's really interesting is that if you take a look at Father's terminal, he talks about anxiously waiting for the sole survivor to make it to the Institute. He ponders, was all of this for nothing? And he says, well, even if this experiment fails, at least I will have learned valuable things about myself and my past. That's a weird thing to say. Because here Father is, in the Institute, and one day on a whim, he remembers that he's got a parent frozen in a vault, and so he goes to his terminal and he pushes a button to let him or her out, and says to himself, oh, this will be a fun experiment, let's see what happens. But then he uses the phrase, was all of this for nothing? All of what? All of pushing one button? What did he invest in this? Not a whole lot. And what could he have possibly learned about himself and his past? By pushing one button? That doesn't make sense to me. Here's what makes sense to me. The previous director of the Institute killed the sole survivor when the Synth program became stable. When Sean grew up, he became the new director of the Institute, and at that time learned that now both of his parents were dead. Out of curiosity, and to learn more about himself and his past, he instructs the Institute to create a clone of one of his parents, the one that was most recently killed. He then replaces the body with the synth and then activates the synth remotely. That would explain why he used the phrase, "was all of this for nothing?" Because that would take a lot of work. It would also help explain why he used the phrase, "I will have learned valuable things about myself and my past." By creating a synth of his father and mother, he's going to learn a lot about his own genetic code, about his ancestors, about where they came from. By delving into the memories of the soul survivor in order to reproduce a memory for the synth, he's going to learn a lot more about his immediate past, and maybe even his extended past. He wouldn't learn anything about that or his history by just pushing a button from the Institute and waiting for the soul survivor to show up. Additionally, I think Father is more comfortable around synths than he is people. He kind of acts like a little god within the Institute. He has everybody calling him Father. It's his genetic code that makes up all of the synths. And unlike many other people in the Institute who refers to synths as robots or machines, in one terminal he refers to them as beings. Beings. That carries a connotation that is not carried with robot or machine. In this terminal, he argues against using the word android to describe the synths. In so doing, he's elevating the synths beyond a simple and mere android. This might go back to his own ego. After all, they're all descended from him. They're basically clones of his DNA. He is their father. They are his beings. This whole sort of godlike persona is starting to develop here. He's a pretty tyrannical director. It's his way or the highway. Those who disobey are punished, sometimes even killed. He never got married that we know of. He certainly didn't have any children, which might help explain why he made a child synth of himself and kept that synth in his own quarters. He's more comfortable around synths. What's really interesting about this is if you side with the Institute and you go back to the Institute and you meet with the child synth of Sean, the boy gives you a holotape from Father.
Here, this is for you. It's a holotape from Father. He said to give it to you, but not to listen to it.
If you are hearing this, then the time has come. I am gone. I can no longer look after young Sean. I hoped that you might be willing. He has been reprogrammed to believe he is your son. I hope that was not too presumptuous on my part. Both he and you deserve a chance to be a family. Please, take care of him.
Whoa, that is very different from the Father that we have known this entire game. Does that sound like a man who considers all synths are just machines? Who considers them to just be property? He wants you two to be a family now that he's gone. It seems like a pretty sentimental, out-of-character thing for Sean to do, especially for a guy who gambled with your own life as an experiment and defended his actions by saying, look, before this moment, we were pretty much strangers.
I have had no love to feel. We have been strangers until now, you and I.
But it would make a little bit more sense if he wasn't gambling with his real parent. He was gambling with a synth of his real parent, which he could duplicate at any moment in the future if he needs to. It makes more sense for a synth child and a synth parent to be a family. Remember in my last video on this topic, Are Synths People? We learned that there's no way to test a person to see if he or she is a synth aside from killing that person.
A living synth is indistinguishable from a human by any medical test yet devised.
So that means that yes, synths can suffer radiation damage, they can get addicted to alcohol and chems, they do get hungry and need food, they do get sleepy and need sleep. So all of the things that you, the soul survivor, deal with on a daily basis, even on survival mode, a synth version of yourself would deal with as well. And since you can't examine your own corpse when dead, there's no way to really know whether or not you have a synth component, which leaves us with lore alone to kind of figure this out. So, here's my best case scenario. Current director of the Institute needs Sean for uncorrupted DNA. Sends Kellogg to get Sean. Kellogg gets Sean, turns off life support for everyone in Vault 111 except the sole survivor. Brings Sean back to the Institute. They develop the synth prototype based on Sean's DNA. director of the Institute, likes the way that the Synth program is going, no longer needs the sole survivor as the backup, and, as is customary for the Institute, kills him or her to tie up loose ends. Meanwhile, young Sean is gaining favor within the Institute and eventually takes over as director. Discovers that both of his parents are now dead. He finds it hard relating to other people in the Institute. They deify him. The other synths see him as a god. He's kind of lonely in his ivory tower. The Synth program is going well. As an experiment, he creates a synth of one of his parents and puts that synth back in Vault 111 and then releases it to see what'll happen. He anxiously awaits the coming of the sole survivor synth to the Institute while he's building a child version of himself, knowing the whole while that he's dying from cancer, that time is short, that the only family he can leave behind is this facsimile family that he's getting ready to put back together, if everything works right. The sole survivor arrives at the Institute. Everything goes according to plan. Father couldn't be more proud. And before he dies, he wipes the mind of young Sean and reprograms him to think that he is the son of the sole survivor. As he dies, he records a message urging his synth parent and a synth version of himself to live on forever as a family. But that is just one fan's crazy conspiracy theory. I'd love to hear what you have to say on the topic. Do you think it's even possible for the sole survivor to be a synth? Or are you so dyed-in-the-wool Brotherhood of Steel that that is not even a possibility? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one of your comments and I respond to the best ones. Do you have any other conspiracy theories? Let me know. I might make a video on that topic. If you like videos like these, please subscribe for more Fallout 4 and conspiracy theory content. And if you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider supporting me on Patreon. Patreon subscribers get access to my private Discord server and a bunch of other cool Oxhorn perks. But more than anything, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just glad you're here watching. Thanks so much, and I'll see you tomorrow with another video.